Now that we're well into year 2 of Honkai Star Rail, coupled with the game pumping up 5 stars like no tomorrow, we're at a point where early version units are under evaluation for whether they're still worth keeping around or not. As you know, while day 1 tier lists may look absurd in retrospect in regards to how we rate units, a lot of that has to do with the lack of any point of reference. For example, early on many people rated Yanqing higher than Himeko, when in the modern day such a thought would be unthinkable. But to be fair, when your only competition was Dan Heng, Arlen, Hook, Physical MC, Serval, Clara, Sushang, and Zila, and accounting for Yanqing's really strong early game, it's not unreasonable for people to have rated him so highly at the time. Over in the support and sustain department, you could see more of that rating based on necessity, not actual value. At the start, high choices for sustain were Japard, Natasha, March, and of course, Little Bailu, the 5-star healer of the group and the abundance representative for the standard pool. Bailu's restorative faculty was more than sufficient at carrying us through the early game, and she had a small edge over Japard in the realm of endurance. Though she still retains a fair bit of usefulness in the healing department, looking at her through the lens of the present meta, you'd be hard-pressed to find a reason to field her over just about anyone else, underscored by her having among the lowest pick grades across all 3 game modes. So for today's episode of Why No One Plays, we'll be discussing how Bailu is the perfect example of what happens when you put all your eggs into one basket. The approach Hoyo took when designing the early units was archetypal in a literal sense. The Hunt character was supposed to attack only one person, the Erudition character was supposed to attack a bunch of enemies, the Harmony character was supposed to give a ton of free stats, so on and so forth. Between the 2 members of the sustain category, Bailu and Japard, they couldn't be more emblematic of their respective paths. Japard was, with no caveat, no asterisk, a tank. His ultimate gave a massive shield to his entire team, almost to the point of being overkill at the time, and his A2 passive made it so enemies would prioritize attacking him. Very traditional tank stuff. Bailu was in the same boat, anything and everything in her kit was about healing. Her skill was a bouncing restore that applied 3 separate heals. Her ultimate was a big heal to her entire party that would also give an invigoration buff for 2 turns, during which whenever a teammate was attacked for up to twice, they would heal a small amount in the hopes that invigoration would prevent a unit from getting wombo comboed by the enemy team by restoring lost HP before the next attack. Supplementary aspects of her kit were also geared towards survival. Her A2 trace made it so excessive healing would give her allies bonus max health, which would essentially always happen. A4 made it so you could trigger invigoration 3 times per application, and A6 gave everyone 10% damage mitigation. Your choices were healing, or more healing. Take your pick. From a playstyle perspective, Bailu prioritized keeping her party alive over all else. Her A6 trace reduces damage taken, her A2 gives more HP, and her invigoration mechanic made it so hardly anyone would be concerned with chip damage. In the event someone were to sustain fatal damage, her talent also possessed an insurance policy, very much appreciated in the early to mid-game when players needed someone to keep them juiced up so they wouldn't have to go to a space anchor to heal. But as we started entering the late to end game, and with every passing version, healing became more of an afterthought in favor of other forms of utility, causing Bailu, who is nothing but healing, to get pushed down in value. There are 3 central factors contributing towards her declining play rate, 2 of which are from within and 1 being without. First and most obvious reason, did you guys happen to notice anything when looking at her ability descriptions? More specifically, did you happen to notice anything missing? If your answer was cleanse, that is correct. Bailu has no cleanse in her kit. The abundance path is practically synonymous with cleansing. Natasha and Luocha's skills in conjunction with their respective A2s clears out 1 negative status effect. Lynx's ultimate's an AoE cleanse and heal, and with her E2 she can block a debuff instance. Gallagher lacks a cleanse in his base kit, but he does give effect rest, while also easily obtaining one through his E2. Hua cleanses people without even doing anything courtesy of her talent. Literally every abundance unit in the game has a cleanse, except Bailu. This is a huge con for the Vidyadhara because cleansing is just as, if not more crucial than healing itself. Bailu provides a ton of healing, so much so that it borders on superfluous. 9 times out of 10 though, the real concern is not whether your party can stay alive, but whether your party can execute its combo without interruption. If at any point someone gets frozen or entangled or CC'd by something, that not only makes them more vulnerable to subsequent damage, but it also compromises uptime and rotations. Having a cleanse on deck is imperative for covering those what-if scenarios, but Bailu is unable to respond to them at all. Worse yet, her talent does not activate if she herself is crowd controlled. That alone tremendously limits what fights you can deploy her in. If even one enemy in a fight has a debuff that can potentially throw a wrench in your team's plans, you have to respect that and bring a cleanse along. The thing is, in this day and age, there's so many debuffs and crowd control effects running amok. Even if you run into a fight that doesn't require a cleanse, Bailu's own strengths get overlapped by other units very easily. Luocha came out in version 1.2 and Lynx in 1.3, both having elements very similar to Bailu's. One of her biggest strengths is that she can heal her party members outside of her turn through invigoration, but Luocha and Lynx can also do the same. Lynx applies health regen over time, providing a steady stream of healing for her party. Most of Luocha's sustain actually takes place outside of his turn through the Abyss field or his automatic skill trigger, so Bailu's consistent healing is easily matched by others. Mind you, she's still one of the best when it comes to emergency healing, but functionally you hardly notice a difference in ease of use between any of them. Other aspects like Bailu's max HP gain can be replicated by Lynx as well. The latter skill survival response is a max HP increase, and on destruction and preservation units it makes them draw aggro. So even if you want to try to use Bailu for Blade, Lynx can do something very similar while helping him out in more ways. Or you can go Luocha, who's just perfect for Blade. For that matter, not only does Bailu not have a cleanse, she just doesn't have any utility at all. Actually, that's a hard statement. Technically, damage mitigation, bonus HP, and death prevention do count as utility, but unless your name is Blade, all of those effects are part of the same category of healing and defense. By utility, I'm mostly referring to buffs, debuffs, or mechanics not involved with sustain. It can be difficult designing a diverse pool of healers in any game, given there's only so many ways you can heal someone. Luocha heals on attack, Bailu heals on taking damage, Huohuo heals upon turn start, Lynx is regeneration. You basically covered every possible avenue in like 4 characters. Every new healer that comes out will likely fall into one of those 4 categories. Gallagher, for instance, is in the same department as Luocha, healing by attacking. So what most developers do to differentiate one from another is to go down the healing plus route. The character can recover HP, but they can also do something else. Gallagher offers a heal through skill and talent, but he can also contribute a fair bit of damage on the side thanks to his empowered basic attack and ultimate dealing a fair bit of damage. Said empowered basic attack reduces the enemy's attack by 15%, and said ultimate applies a debuff that makes him take more break damage. In terms of raw sustain, he's significantly less effective than Bailu, but it's good enough to keep his party alive. More importantly, his utility allows him to take a more offensive role in super break teams, to the point where he contributes a meaningful amount of damage for his team. It's true that without Harmony Trailblazer, Gallagher deals practically no damage. But the point still stands, he became one of the best 4-stars in the game because he does just enough to check off the sustain box while bringing a lot more to the table. Likewise, Huohuo is in a similar boat. She can heal a ton of HP if needed through her skill, but most of her usefulness comes from the on-turn restoration and notably her cleanse. If you're under a lot of crowd control fire, you can bring Huohuo and she'll cleanse your party a billion times over. The real incentive to bring her though is her ultimate, boosting everyone else's attack by 40% and supplying a 20% battery to each of their ultimates. More often than not, people don't even pay attention to Huohuo's sustaining capability, they mostly care about her buffing capability. To be fair, Bailu does have the potential to offer more than just healing and sustain. Her first Eidolon provides a bit of energy to allies if they are full health when invigoration ends, and with E4, she gives 10% bonus damage to allies who get healed by her skill. It can stack up to 3 times for 30% bonus damage. Credit where credit is due, that's a significant buff in DPS if you can pull it off. Being a standard banner unit, over time you'll gradually acquire additional copies of her whether you like it or not. But unless you're extremely lucky, or rather unlucky enough to get 5 copies of Bailu, Eidolon 4 is out of reach for most people, and no one in their right mind's gonna break the bank over a character with no guarantee, and on the standard banner no less. Comparatively, units like Huohuo have more accessible value in Eidolons. Apart from her ridiculous E6, her E1 might be her best, extending the duration of her talent but also giving 12% bonus speed to her entire party. Considering how brainless it is to activate her talent, you can treat this as Ranmei's talent where she gives her entire party speed by merely existing in battle. While not nearly as impactful, Luocha's E1 has an identical AoE buff for his team, to the tune of 20% bonus attack while the Abyss field is active. Everyone else has either a modicum or a plethora of offensive utility in their kits, allowing them to contribute more than just healing, whereas Bailu is nothing but healing and defensive utility. Unlike in other RPGs, where keeping your party alive is just as paramount as killing the enemy, Star Wars combat towards the endgame basically turns into a DPS race. The best defense is a strong offense type deal. Therefore, a character who's solely geared towards keeping the team alive such as Bailu comes off as unnecessary most of the time. What if, though, you ran into fights that did tax your party's ability to stay alive? That brings us to the third factor diminishing her play rate. She not only has to compete against the other members of Abundance, she also has to compete against the Preservation category. Both paths share the same goal of keeping the team alive, granted through different ways, but the end result is the same nonetheless. Earlier I talked about how Bailu actually had a small edge over Japard in the early to mid game due to Mr. Landau's shield being attached to his ultimate and technique, which aren't always accessible since if you're chaining domain runs you can't use your technique before the start of every fight, and ultimates need time to regenerate. Over time, those bits and pieces of damage you take will eventually force you to heal with an item or space anchor, whereas Bailu can keep everyone's HP topped off forever so you can theoretically do a billion domain runs without having to stop. Her advantage ends there though. While Bailu does come with ways to prevent you from getting bursted down, her A2, A6, and her talent, it's nowhere near sufficient at stopping actual burst damage. Most bosses in the endgame have attacks that deal twice or even thrice the health bar of your squishy targets, and multiple times over, making shields and cover tanking the more pragmatic choice when it comes to survival. I go over this in further detail in my tanks vs healer video, which I recommend you check out after this one if you haven't yet, but the long and short of it is, the effectiveness of healing is capped at whatever the max health of the recipient is. If you give a 10k HP heal to a 3k HP target, it will only heal 3k HP, and the extra 7k is wasted. However, if you give a 10k HP shield to a 3k HP target, the shield is superimposed on top of the health bar, granting them effectively 13k max health for a couple turns. When stacking HP to prevent yourself against imminent attack, shields are typically better than healing since they take the damage first before the character does, whereas even if you have a trillion HP's worth of heals, none of that matters if your party member is dead. Bailu's one defining trait, the one part of her kit that's not completely emulated by another healer, is conceptually overshadowed by the preservation path. Gepard, Aventurine, and Fushuan are lifetimes ahead of Bailu in the realm of protection. The first two give shields big enough for your party to withstand upwards of 10,000 damage, while Fushuan redirects damage that would be dealt to your party to herself. Additionally, the two limited 5-star tanks accounted for Gepard's weakness of eventually losing in battles of endurance in their own ways. Through A4, Fushuan can replenish a token amount of her team's health whenever using her ultimate, and though I might be cheating since technically it's not in her base kit, her light cone offers a near full party-wide heal at the start of every wave, so if you're chaining domains you never have to worry about your HP. Aventurine begins every fight with a shield, blocking any damage received from enemy first strikes, and since unlike Gepard, Aventurine shields are attached to a skill, you can go through entire fights without ever seeing any of your party members' health bars go down. Combining his A4 trace with his talent and skill, Aventurine perma-shields your team, and of course, both of them have ways to increase the party's DPS in the same way Huohuo and Gallagher do. Bailu is a one-trick pony in a field dominated by characters who wear multiple hats. It's punishment enough that she doesn't have a cleanse, but pragmatically you can think of more reasons to use other characters besides her. Like I said, if you manage to unlock her E4 and if you find a boss with no debuffs or crowd control, maybe you can make an argument that Bailu is optimal, but they really shot her in the foot with power and feature creep. Luocha came out not even like a month after Starla came out, utterly destroying Bailu in every which way possible. But at the very least, given you need two parties for MOC, you can use him for one and her for the other. But then in 1.3 they bought in Fushuan and Lynx, two more sustain units, with the former power creeping Gepard, and then they released Huohuo who power creeps Luocha who power creeps Bailu. So to put things into perspective, you know it's rough for Bailu when the units who power crept her are getting power crept themselves. It's only going to get more convoluted from this point onwards. Gallagher and Aventurine are honestly more damage dealers than sustain units in the eyes of most people. And when more healers and tanks come out in the future, I bet you my mother's delicious home cooking they'll make Aventurine, Gallagher, and Huohuo look like the Bailus of version 2. Realistically, I don't see any way they can retroactively buff her as well. Gepard and Fire Trailblazer got a bit of love when Akron came out since both of them can apply debuffs to stack up her ultimate, but even that was short-lived when Aventurine came out the very next banner. There's nothing in Bailu's toolkit that isn't replicated by someone else. The one thing she has that no other healer does is 10% damage reduction, but unless you make a character whose DPS scales off that very specific stat, in a scenario you can throw Bailu in, you can also throw literally anyone else. She became the Chi-Chi of HSR where if your only merit is healing, it doesn't matter if you have billions of healing, people want someone who can do more than just that. I suppose why no one plays Bailu was bound to happen. Even back in version 1.0, people speculated she would get benched as soon as another healer came out with more utility, so it wasn't entirely unexpected. In any case, be sure to let me know your thoughts on Bailu in the comments down below, whether you agree or disagree with my points. For now though, if you enjoyed the video, it would be great if you left a like and subscribed. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Star Rail Why No One Plays videos if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.